Greetings. Today we're going to be talking about the differences between Deber plus the infinitive and Deber de plus the infinitive. Now before we even get into those, let's look at the verb deber. So the verb deber means to owe, okay? So let's say you are in a taxi and at the end of the trip you ask the taxi driver, "Cuánto le debo?" Right? How much do I owe you? So that's the way the verb is traditionally used, okay? But when we combine deber plus an infinitive, we're going to get a different meaning, right? Okay? So deber plus the infinitive and deber de plus the infinitive are examples of what is known as a verbal periphrasis, okay? And a verbal periphrasis is going to be a grammatical construction usually consisting of two verbs, whereby the first verb is conjugated and the second verb usually takes on an impersonal form like an infinitive or a past participle, right? And a verbal periphrasis is going to be used for a specific function. So remember I told you that the verb deber means to owe. But when you combine it with an infinitive, it is going to function differently. And these are the two functions that deber plus the infinitive are going to have, okay? So let's start with deber plus the infinitive. Let's look at the uses of deber plus the infinitive, okay? So the first use or meaning is going to be to express obligation. And in English, this would be represented by words such as must, should, or have to. And what you see in the brackets here would be synonyms. Basically synonyms of deber plus the infinitive, okay? So let's look at the examples. Debemos completar la tarea para mañana. We must complete the task by tomorrow. So this is an obligation. This is something that we need to do. Okay? Now let's use the synonyms. So that is the same thing as saying tenemos que completar la tarea para mañana. We have to complete the task by tomorrow. Same thing. Haber de. Hemos de completar la tarea para mañana. We must complete the task by tomorrow. Same meaning. Haber que, but the difference with haber que is that haber que is usually going to be impersonal. It's going to be, the construction is going to be impersonal most of the time. So you don't conjugate that according to a subject. You just use the third person, okay? So in that case, if we want to use haber que, we would say something like hay que completar la tarea para mañana. The task must be completed by tomorrow. Of course, there's no subject, but we're just mentioning what must be done, okay? So those are just examples of these other expressions being substituted for deber plus the infinitive. So you would see that they carry similar meanings, right? So next example. Los padres deben proteger a sus niños. Parents must protect their children. Yep. So that's their responsibility. As a parent, your responsibility is to take care of your child, right? Or protect them, all right? And next example, no debes fumar. You should not smoke. You can also look at this as a recommendation, but should could also be an obligation. Yes, you use should to give recommendations, but should is an obligation as well. Okay, so no debes fumar, that could be seen as a recommendation, but it can also be seen as an obligation. You should not smoke. No debes fumar. Okay. Right. So The first use of deber plus the infinitive is going to be obligation. Now, the second use of deber plus the infinitive is going to be to express supposition. And a supposition is going to be an assumption, a guess, a speculation. Meaning, we form an idea, but this idea, we do not know if it's true or not. It's just based on its probability. So more likely, more than likely, right? This is the second meaning of deber plus the infinitive, right? And it also means must, but of course the must is going to take on a different meaning. We're no longer talking about obligations, but we're talking about supposition or hypotheses, right? So 1. Pablo está ausente. Debe estar enfermo. Pablo is absent. He must be sick. Not necessarily. What if Pablo just decided he wanted to stay home? Not necessarily. He doesn't have to be sick. But based on probability, it is likely, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that is the case, right? So, yes, that's the first example. 2. Ese hombre gasta mucho dinero. Debe tener un empleo lucrativo. That man spends a lot of money. He must have a lucrative job. Yes, it's likely. Because if you have so much income, disposable income, and you're spending lots of money, it would be a logical conclusion, logical assumption to believe that he has a lucrative job. But again, that might not be the case. What if the guy is just a reckless spender, right? Maybe he doesn't have the money, but he still spends it, right? So, yeah, that doesn't necessarily mean he has a lucrative job. It's just saying this is our assumption, right? So he must have a lucrative job, right? And the third one, la chica ha dejado de hablar. Debe haber completado su presentación. The girl has stopped speaking. She must have completed her presentation. No? Maybe the girl stopped speaking because her mind went blank. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. It doesn't necessarily mean that she has completed her presentation. Her mind could have gone blank, right? So, again, that's a reasonable conclusion, but it isn't facts. That doesn't mean that that is the case per se, right? So, these are the two uses of deber plus the infinitive. So what I should also mention is that you can use these with other tenses and it would carry the same, and the meaning would be the same. Whether it is the conditional, whether it's the preterite, the future, what have you. It is going to be the same meaning, okay? But, of course, for this segment, we just focus on the present, right? Alright, so these are the two uses of deber plus the infinitive. Now let us proceed to deber de plus the infinitive. Okay, so we move on to the single usage of deber de plus the infinitive. And that single usage would be a supposition. And of course, just like deber plus the infinitive, it's the same thing. It means must, and a supposition is also known as a guess, an assumption, or speculation, right? So technically speaking, you really don't have to use deber de plus the infinitive, because you can use deber plus the infinitive to express a supposition as well. But it's still important that you know how deber de plus the infinitive is used, so that you would know when you see it in usage, whether that when you see it at play, whether that be an online article or whatever, right? You know that this is the right usage, because this is the only context in which you can use deber de plus the infinitive, right? Okay, so ella siempre saca buenas notas. Debe de estudiar mucho. She always gets good grades. She must study a lot. Once again, logical conclusion, if she does well, most likely she studies a lot. Or maybe she's just very smart, just naturally bright, right? Again, same thing. Logical conclusion, but doesn't necessarily have to be the case, okay? 2. Esta mujer es musculosa. Debe de hacer ejercicio. This woman is muscular. She must work out. Yes? If someone looks like they're in shape, of course the logical assumption would be that they work out. And even if they take steroids or whatever, they still have to put in some form of exercise to get the body to look like that. So yeah, but that might not necessarily be the case, right? But it is most likely or probable, right? 3. Mark no compró este coche. Debe de ser costoso. Mark did not buy this car. It must be expensive. Okay? That is reasonable. So in that case, if we're saying that Mark did not buy the car because it was expensive, that might not be the case. Maybe he didn't buy the car because he didn't like the color or he didn't like the model. There are so many other reasons as to why he probably did not buy the car. That may have nothing to do with price, right? But that's just an assumption, right? One of the millions of assumptions that we could have made about why Mark chose not to buy this car, right? So, yes, this is the only context in which you would use deber de plus the infinitive, okay? All right? So I hope that you understood the differences between these two verbal constructions. So this is all for today. Creo que ustedes deben de haber disfrutado de la lección. Gracias por ver y nos vemos.